I was like, good morning. Good morning, good morning. We're on March the 9th of 2018. Ready for our Bible study. Reading in Numbers chapters 11 through 13. Oh, there's such good, interesting things to read about this morning. Lots of good stuff. Moses is going back and good morning, reporting to the Lord about what the people had said. And so God had him gather the 70 elders together, station them around the tabernacle. And in verse 25, Numbers 11:25, and the Lord came down in the cloud. I'm just telling you, you guys pay attention to the cloud. Pay attention to how often God is referred to about being in a cloud, and even the second coming, he will appear in the clouds. And the Lord came down in the cloud and spoke to Moses. Then he gave the 70 elders the same spirit that was upon Moses. And when the spirit rested upon them, they prophesied. But this never happened again. This is old covenant. Before the death of Jesus Christ, he poured his spirit out on them. I just love that. And then, but watch how the people responded. 2 men had stayed behind in the camp. They were listed among the elders, but they'd not gone out to the tabernacle. Yet the Spirit rested on them. They weren't even with them. These 2 weren't with them, but the same Spirit rested on them as well. So they prophesied there in the camp around the other people. And a young man ran and reported it to Moses. Isn't that just like us? When we're operating in the flesh, we're being very carnal, and one of our brothers or sisters has something amazing happen with the Lord, and we're jealous. I mean, somebody starts operating in their true giftings of the Lord, and they realize that healing is in them, and they start laying hands on people and they're healed, or they start prophesying, or you just name it. I mean, even a gift of administration, any of the giftings that there is, and watch how the people around them will respond to them. Mm-hmm. So jealous. And I'm not pointing my fingers at anybody. I mean, I might not have just ran to my neighbor or ran over to Travis and said, look at what so-and-so's doing. But we've all had those thoughts in our heart. To begin with, when we are comparing ourselves to others, when we're never quite good enough, we'll never quite stack up. When we start the game of comparison, we'll never add up. We'll never add up. There's always somebody with something greater than what we want. But their response, they ran and reported to Moses. They're prophesying in the camp. And Joshua, son of Nun, who had been Moses' assistant through his youth, protested, Moses, my master, make them stop. So even the second in command, Moses, make them stop. No, you're the only one that's supposed to do that. And then but Moses replied back, are you jealous for my sake? Are you being jealous for me? I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his spirit upon them all. And then Moses went back to the camp with the elders. And now the Lord sent a wind that brought quail from the sea. Now remember, they've been murmuring and complaining. They didn't like the manna. They were tired of the manna and they wanted meat. And then again, see how they respond. It's kind of like, have you ever gone on a fast? Carrie just recently finished her first 3-day fast. And so I was just telling her, I said, when you go 3 days and all you have is water, you're going to think about that hunger so much that you're going to want to gorge yourself. And that's just what these guys have done. I mean, we can see the thought process. There's no meat. Oh, it's manna again. It's manna again. For however long that lasted, all they could think about is, oh, if I could just choose some meat. That's what we do in our minds. With whatever it is that's tormenting us, that's what we're doing we're allowing our thoughts to rule. We allow our emotions to rule so that when the good comes, now the Lord sent a wind that brought quail from the sea and let them fall all around the camp. For miles in every direction there were quail flying about 3 feet above the ground. So the people went out and caught quail all that day and throughout the night and all the next day too. Now I wonder what would have happened had they obeyed the same rule with the quail that they had done with the manna, and they gathered just enough for that day. But gluttony kicked in, and they gathered it all day, all night, and all the next day, and no one gathered less than 50 bushels. Have you ever seen a bushel? I can remember doing bushels of green beans, bushels of tomatoes growing up, canning. That's a lot. And they had no less than 50. No wonder it made God mad. But while they were while they were gorging themselves on the meat, while it was still in their mouths, the anger of the Lord blazed against them, and he struck them with a severe plague. There was something else about Moses that I wanted to say.
Well, the next part was pretty good.
The next part, as in
on 12:1.
Mm-hmm. Oh, about the criticizing Moses. Yeah, his sister criticized Moses. There was something on the, yeah.
Earlier, you was talking about having that other people jealous of you or whatever. That's because they're still living in the flesh and not walking in the spirit.
That's right, Travis. They were walking in the flesh and not walking in the spirit, and that's why they become jealous. I mean, I'm telling y'all, what God's teaching me is anytime there's something wrong with me, I'm mad, I'm hurt, I'm offended, I've got my feelings hurt, I'm jealous, I'm frustrated, and the list just goes on and on and on and on. Anytime that's happening, God is definitely telling me that it's a lacking inside of me, that I have to cry out to him even more because I'm in my flesh. See, in the spirit, we'll never feel that. In the spirit, Brooke can never hurt my feelings. In the spirit, because when I'm in my spirit, I'm one with him. And it's just like Jesus and his example. He never got his feelings hurt. I mean, we'll finish up here that leads us to the New Testament, but I'll finish up here because Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses because he had married a Cushite woman. God makes it very plain all the way through the Bible that it's not his best to marry outside of your tribe. He's very plain with that. You can't miss that if you read this word, that it's not his best. That is not what he asked. I mean, that's what happened to Solomon. Solomon's problems is that he married outside of his tribe. And so here it is, Moses and Miriam and Aaron is criticizing Moses because he married a Cushite woman. But yet, see, do you hear what I just said? It's not God's best, and yet look at how Moses was. I know the part I wanted to read about Moses is that he was the most humble man of all. I think it's later. I was looking for it before, but it's actually later. And so, okay, great. Thank you. It's right there. Thank you. You kept trying to point me in that direction. So they had said, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he spoken through us too? But the Lord heard them. Now Moses was very humble, more humble than any other person on earth. Even though he didn't obey, but when he married her, he was in rebellion and running anyway. If you guys remember that, he had killed a Hebrew. He had killed one of the Egyptians, not a Hebrew, the Egyptian. He had killed the Egyptian soldier, and when he found out that people saw it, he ran in fear, and he was gone for 40 years. And while he was gone, away from what his purpose in life was, that's when he married a Cushite woman. But still, God used Moses. He was the most humble person on the earth. What would it take? I mean, I think about where I'm at right now to get Elizabeth to the point that God would say, Elizabeth is the most humble person on the earth. And now remember, there's no condemnation in this. I just know God is working on me. Every time I read that, he works on me. And I believe every time I read it, I get a little bit more humble and a little bit more humble. And I start walking more in the spirit, Travis, instead of in the flesh. And that's my heart. I want to be spirit-led, because if I'm being spirit-led, I'm being love-led in everything I say and do. Okay, so anyway, and so because they spoke out against God, so immediately the Lord called to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam and said, go out to the tabernacle, all three of you. So the three of them went to the tabernacle. Then the Lord descended in the pillar of cloud. Once again, there's that cloud. And stood at the entrance of the tabernacle. Aaron and Miriam he called, and they stepped forward, and the Lord said to them, now listen to what I say. This is God speaking. If there were prophets among you, I, the Lord, would reveal myself in visions. Now remember, God doesn't change. He's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I would reveal myself in visions. I would speak to them in dreams, but not with my servant Moses. Of all my house, he is the one I trust. Can God trust you? I speak to him face to face, clearly, and not in riddles. He sees the Lord as he is. So why were you not afraid to criticize my servant? And then we know that they were given leprosy. Miriam was given leprosy. And, it's truths like that coupled with other things that's all the way through this Bible that I don't have to worry about what people say about me. I don't have to worry about, and I'm learning that. Learning that in some brand new ways right now, March 9th, 2018, that I don't have to worry about what people say. They criticized Moses, and he's the one that God revealed himself to face. The Lord was angry with them, and he departed. Wonder how that felt. They knew he was angry. The Lord, I'm just so glad we don't live back then. I never have to worry about God leaving me. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. Then it goes on. There's just so much good in today's. There's so many stories in here. And Moses then sends the 12 out to go check out the promised land, the land flowing with milk and honey. It lists them who went. And they went, and sure enough, it's the land flowing with milk and honey. Oh, man. So the whole promise of them going anyway was God had promised them the land of milk and honey. I wonder why Moses sent them to go check it out. I know there's a significance to that, because I don't actually believe that Moses had doubt about the land flowing with milk and honey. I think it was for the people. and definitely was probably because God led him to do that anyway for the people. And so we've got those that went and all they saw was the giants, and we've got two that came back that all they saw was the blessings and the glory of the promised land. But anyway, it goes into Mark then, and it's the Passover, and I hope I can remember my point leading into this again. But it's they're conducting the Passover, and I ask God all the time as I'm reading the words, "Take this. This is my body." I think about these disciples that lived with Jesus 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 years. They were with him. They were in the presence of pure love. They were in the presence of purity. They were in the presence of perfection. They were in the presence of total humbleness, humility, godly humbleness. They were in the presence of righteousness, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they loved him. They loved him. And I just wonder what it felt like. Again, they went up and they prepared the room, they prepared the meal for the last, and Jesus has been telling them. But I got to remember as I'm reading through this that they didn't believe him. They really didn't believe that this is what was going to happen to him. But again, Judas betrayed him with a kiss. And that has forever changed my life and continues to change my life. Jesus didn't have to allow Judas to kiss him. He had already identified that he was the one that would betray him. And yet Jesus let him close enough to him that he kissed him on the cheek. And you know, all we have to do is get an ugly look from somebody and we're ready to divorce them. We're ready to, I mean, all they have to do is bite our head off a little bit. And Judas betrayed Jesus with a kiss. He allowed that kiss to take place, which then identified him as the Messiah. But anyway, so it's the Last Supper, and I know I've lost my point about how the Old Testament went into the New Testament. Let me just look just for a second. And, you know, and oh, wow, you know, having been with him all that time and to have him tell them that he was troubled and that he needed them to pray. I just myself believe that this was the very first time and only time that Jesus had told them to pray for him and to pray with him because he was troubled. And yet they couldn't stay awake. And where I want to be so hard on them, about that golly, and he said to them, his own words were, couldn't you even stay awake for an hour? I have to know that I believe that God in his sovereignty probably caused that sleepiness. Mm-hmm. So the scriptures would be fulfilled. Mm-hmm. If there'd been any deviation at all, then the prophecies wouldn't have been fulfilled. The scriptures wouldn't have been fulfilled about what was happening. And then he tells them, verse 48, so they're there to arrest him. Judas has kissed him. They're now arresting him. Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him, but one of the men with Jesus pulled out his sword, struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his ear. Jesus asked him, am I some dangerous revolutionary that you came with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there among you teaching every day. But these things are happening to fulfill what the scriptures say about me. Then all the disciples deserted him and ran away. One young man following behind was clothed only in a long linen shirt. When the mob tried to grab him, he slipped out of his shirt and ran away naked. After being with him 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, being in the presence of pure love, they all just left him. They just, you know, and wow, I still am forever changed by the news reports of a couple of years ago of the 12 in some far off country that they, real life current event type thing just a couple of years ago, marched them out on the sand, and the soldier had a machete in his hand and told them to denounce Christ. And one by one, he cut off their heads. And the news reports that I heard from that just a couple of years ago when this happened is that there was 2 of them that cried out Jesus just as he swung the machete. And to think about having that kind of endurance for Christ today in the 21st century, to have that kind of endurance when the disciples didn't have that kind of endurance. You know, in a way, Peter did. Peter's the one that drew that sword. He knew when he drew that sword, he was ready for battle. And he knew he was putting his life on the line, but then he ends up denying him. And they all ran away and left him. And then here's these 12. And it just now hit me that there was 12. Just now hit me that it was 12 they put out on the beach and cut their heads off. And how, you know, it was one thing to be the first one. What was it like to be the 12th one? I say that a lot. You know, that really impacted me, that you listened and watched that happen, and none of them denied Christ, even at the cost of their own life. I just always am asking myself, Lord, am I there? If they really did, they broke down the doors this morning because we're in here having Bible study, and they came in and arrested us, would I stand strong? Would I stand strong? The Proverbs, the Lord detests the use of dishonest scales, but he delights in accurate weights. Well, you know what that's telling us? We don't cheat in the little things.
Mhm.
You can't just slightly change the scales. You can't just take a pencil because, where I work, they've got plenty of pencils. I can take them home with me. You can't just pad your time card just a little bit, I know I took this break, but I'm not going to let that reflect on my time card. I mean, that's the kind of stuff this refers to. Yesterday, Tom and I stopped and got something to eat, and I had ordered a side dish, and we sat down, and they told us they had to prepare it. And please understand, everything I ever speak to you guys is because it speaks to me. If I'm speaking it is because God is correcting me some way. But the temptation came yesterday, is what I'm trying to say, is that I ordered a side dish and they said it wasn't ready. They had to prepare it. So Tom paid for the meal, and we heard them sell them, this other side dish will be on there. But it was busy. They had some construction workers that came in, so it was busy. And these young girls were, it was a busy time in a fast food restaurant. We go and we sat down, and I pulled the receipt over, and I said, oh, they didn't charge us for that. And I said, well, I'm not even sure they're even going to remember it. Well, I don't know. 5 minutes later, here they come with that side dish. And you know how easy it would have been? This girl didn't have a clue that it hadn't been paid for, and she wasn't going to check. I could have just as easily have said, okay, hey, I got a free side dish.
Mhm.
But you know what I believe? I believe that could have made me as sick could be if I ate that. And it's the Proverbs. It's this. I mean, there was a time in my life, guys, when I would have thought, well, that's their mistake. That's their fault. I mean, I was there as an adult thinking, oh, they should have charged me. They give me back $5 too much. And I would have walked away saying, well, man, this is my lucky day. I just got $5 and it's not mine. But then you read the Proverbs that says the Lord detests the use of dishonest scales, but he delights in accurate weights. Pride leads to disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. Honesty guides good people. Dishonesty destroys treacherous people. So I went to bed last night and my tummy didn't hurt. We paid for that side dish. Praise God, I passed that test. I want to pass them all. But anyway, okay. You guys have a wonderful weekend. Thanks for joining us.